I want you to picture something with me for a second. You walk into a room. Not just any room. A room that was supposed to be safe. Family territory. Maybe it's someone's living room. Maybe it's a coffee shop they picked out. Doesn't matter. What matters is they told you it would be casual. Simple. Just a conversation. Maybe even use the word closure. Like that was something you could schedule between lunch and dinner on a Tuesday afternoon. But the second you walk through that door, your gut knows. You know that feeling. That primal instinct that kicks in when something's off. When the energy in a room feels staged, rehearsed, wrong? Yeah, that. The chairs aren't arranged like a family gathering. They're positioned like a firing squad, all facing one direction, all facing the one empty chair, your chair, the one they saved for you. And everyone's already sitting, already waiting, already looking at you with these tight, controlled smiles that don't reach their eyes. And there's someone else there, a complete stranger, sitting at the head of the table like they own the place. Briefcase open, paper stacked, that professional, neutral expression that screams, I'm here on business. And you're thinking, who the hell is this? Why is there a stranger at my family discussion? You don't even get to sit down before the papers hit the table. Not handed to you, placed, slid across like a contract at a car dealership, and you look down and see legal terms, numbers, clauses, the kind of language designed to sound reasonable until you realize it's asking you to give up everything. And right then, standing there with everyone staring at you, you feel it. That sick, heavy dread settling into your chest. That voice in your head screaming, get out, leave, run. But you can't run from family, right? That's what they count on. That's what they're banking on. Your loyalty, your guilt, your desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, you're wrong about this. But you're not wrong. Something bad is about to happen. And you're standing right in the middle of it. So I sit down. Not because I want to. Not because I trust this. But because standing there makes me feel exposed. Like prey that just realized it walked into a trap. And the moment my body hits that chair, it begins. The stranger introduces themselves. Some kind of estate planner. Family mediator. Financial advisor. The title doesn't matter because the role is clear. They're here to make this official. To give this ambush legitimacy. To frame what they're about to do to me as professional. As reasonable. As normal. And then they start talking. Fast. God, so fast. One person finishes a sentence, and someone else picks it up like they practiced this. Like they ran through this script while I was driving over, completely clueless. They're tag-teaming me with talking points. With statistics. With their version of what's best for everyone. Everyone, by the way. Not me specifically. Everyone. Like my needs and their needs are somehow the same thing. Like what's convenient for them is what's fair to me. And every time I try to interrupt, every time I try to ask a question or slow this freight train down, someone cuts me off with this patronizing gentleness. Let me finish. We'll get to that. This will make more sense in a moment. But it never makes more sense. It just gets more complicated. More deliberately confusing. More designed to overwhelm me until I'm too exhausted to fight back. And then someone, I don't even remember who, drops the line they probably spent hours perfecting. We just want to make this as easy as possible. For everyone. Especially for you. Especially for me. Like they're doing me a favor. Like ambushing me with lawyers and contracts and coordinated pressure is an act of love. The subtext is clear. Sign this. Agree to this. Comply. Because if you don't, things are going to get messy. And we all know you don't want messy. We all know you don't want conflict. So just sign the papers and make this easy. Make this go away. I'm outnumbered. I'm unprepared. I'm being rushed. And they know it. That's the point. That's the whole strategy. Keep the pressure on. Keep talking. Keep moving until I break. But here's the thing they didn't count on. I don't break easy. I said no. Just like that. Calm. Direct. I'm not signing this. 5 words. That's all it took. And I watched the masks fall off in real time. You ever see that happen? When people who've been performing suddenly drop character. The smiles vanished. The warm, understanding expressions hardened into something cold. Something calculating. The gentle voices turned sharp. Impatient. Frustrated. It was like watching a magic trick in reverse. The illusion shattered, and I could see exactly what was underneath. These people, my family, had never intended to have a discussion. They'd intended to deliver an ultimatum. And my refusal wasn't part of their script. The language changed immediately. No more, we understand this is difficult. No more, we're here to support you. Now it was, you need to think about the consequences. Now it was, this could get very complicated very quickly. Now it was, we're trying to be reasonable here, but if you're going to be difficult about this. Difficult. That's what I became the moment I said no. Not careful. Not thoughtful. Not protective of my own interests. Difficult. Like protecting yourself is somehow an act of aggression against the people trying to rob you. The stranger, the professional they'd brought in to legitimize this circus, leaned forward with this practiced concern and started talking about timelines. About how these matters can escalate. About legal fees and court costs, and how much simpler it would be to resolve this today. Resolve. Like I'm a problem to be solved. Like my grief is a logistical inconvenience. Then came the threats. Subtle at first. Wrapped in layers of plausible deniability. We'd hate for this to drag out and get expensive. You know how people talk. These things can damage relationships permanently. They were so careful. So calculated. Nothing you could record and play back and say, see? They threatened me. Just implications. Just pressure. Just enough to plant doubt. And I felt it. That rage building in my chest. That white-hot fury at the sheer audacity of it all. They'd planned this. They'd coordinated. They'd weaponized my grief, my trust, my love, and turned it into leverage. And now they were sitting here, in this staged intervention, threatening me because I wouldn't voluntarily give them what they wanted. Part of me wanted to explode, to flip that table, to tell them exactly what I thought of their solution, and their threats and their fake concern. To walk out and never look back. But I didn't, because I knew something they didn't, and I needed them to keep going. Keep threatening. Keep showing me exactly who they really were. I stopped reacting. Just stopped. Let them talk. Let them make their threats, and paint their pictures of legal nightmares and family destruction. And I sat there, breathing slowly, looking around the room like I was seeing it for the first time. I noticed things. Small things. The way the stranger's briefcase was positioned at a specific angle. The way the papers were organized with sticky tabs marking specific sections. The way everyone kept glancing at each other, coordinating their responses without speaking. Like they'd practiced this. Like they'd run this play before. And then, right in the middle of someone's speech about protecting the family legacy, I said something. Something quiet. Something that made absolutely no sense to them in that moment. I said, "It's interesting that you chose to meet here. In this specific place." The room went silent, like someone had hit pause on the whole production. The stranger looked confused. The family members exchanged glances. Someone asked, "What do you mean by that?" I didn't answer. I just smiled. Not a big smile. Not a threatening smile. Just a small, knowing smile. The kind of smile you give when you're holding cards no one knows you have. What does that mean? The question came sharper now. Urgent. Nervous. They didn't like not knowing something. They didn't like losing control of their carefully orchestrated ambush. I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. Left those papers exactly where they placed them. "I think we should continue this conversation," I said. "But not today. Not like this." The confusion in that room was thick enough to cut with a knife. They'd lost the script. Lost the momentum. And they had no idea what just happened. But they were about to find out. Because they weren't the only ones who'd been preparing. They'd just been too arrogant to realize it. Before we go any further, if this story is hitting close to home, if you've ever felt outnumbered, manipulated, or pressured by people who claim to love you, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. Because what comes next is going to show you exactly how to protect yourself when the people you trust become the people you need to protect yourself from. Let me take you back. Before all of this, before the ambush, before the lawyers and the threats and the realization that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, I grew up in a pretty typical American household. Middle class, suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and people still waved when they drove past. On paper, we looked normal, functional, happy even. But if you looked closer, If you actually paid attention, you'd see the cracks. See, I had two parents. Two very different people with two very different ways of seeing the world. One of them valued stability, preparation. They believed in living below your means, saving for emergencies, thinking 3 steps ahead. They taught me to read the fine print, to ask questions, to never sign anything without understanding exactly what I was agreeing to. Protect yourself, they'd say, because no one else will. The other parent, they chased appearances, status. They cared about what the neighbors thought, about keeping up with the Joneses, about looking successful even when the bills were piling up behind the scenes. Everything was about image, about perception, about maintaining this facade of perfection that didn't exist. Growing up between those two worldviews was like standing on a fault line. And when you grow up in that kind of environment, you learn things. You learn to read people, to notice when someone's saying one thing but meaning another, to spot manipulation wrapped in concern, to see the difference between love and control. I also learned what it feels like to be emotionally neglected without anyone realizing they're doing it. To be the kid who's fed and housed and clothed, but still starving for actual attention. Actual connection. You know what that does to a person. It makes you independent, self-reliant, but it also leaves you vulnerable to anyone who finally offers you that belonging you've been craving. I mention all this because it matters. Because the person they ambushed in that room wasn't naive, wasn't stupid, wasn't some easy mark who could be pressured into giving up their rights with a few veiled threats. They just thought I was. They thought grief would make me weak, make me compliant, make me easy to manipulate. They were wrong. Then it happened. The loss. The one that split my life into before and after. The parent who taught me to prepare, to question, to protect myself, they died. Suddenly. No warning. No chance to say goodbye. One day they were here, and the next day they were gone, and I was standing in a funeral home picking out a casket and wondering how life could change so completely in the span of a heartbeat. Grief is a strange thing. It's private and public at the same time. You're drowning in this ocean of pain, trying to figure out how to breathe without them, and everyone around you is watching, judging, measuring your reactions against their expectations of how grief should look. And that's when I saw it, the difference between private grief and performative concern. Some people showed up quietly, brought food, sat with me in silence, didn't demand anything from me, just were there. Others, they showed up with agendas, with questions about the will, about assets, about property. They'd hug me at the funeral with tears in their eyes, and then corner me 20 minutes later to ask if I'd thought about what comes next. Like my parents' body wasn't even cold yet. And then the paperwork started appearing. First, it was innocent. Death certificates, insurance claims, the normal administrative nightmare that comes with losing someone. But then it got weird, complicated. I started seeing documents that didn't make sense. Requests for information about accounts I didn't know existed. Questions about plans I'd never been told about. That's when I learned the truth. My parent, the one who taught me to prepare, had been preparing for this exact scenario. They'd known, maybe not when it would happen, but they'd known that their death would bring out the worst in certain people. So they'd made plans, quietly, carefully, without telling anyone. They'd protected me, even from beyond the grave. And the people who'd been circling, waiting for their opportunity, were about to find out that ambushing the grieving child of a strategic planner was a very bad idea. But they didn't know that yet. Not in those early days. In those early days, they just saw an opportunity, a vulnerable target, someone they could pressure before they figured out what they were entitled to. It started with phone calls, just checking in, seeing how you're doing. Wanted to make sure you weren't alone. Sweet, right? Caring. Exactly what you'd want to hear from family during the worst time of your life. Except these calls always ended the same way. With a question, with a suggestion, with this casual mention of things we need to discuss or matters we should probably address soon. They'd frame it as helping me, as taking things off my plate, as protecting me from stress. Then came the messages, text messages, emails, Facebook messages, LinkedIn messages. Yeah, someone actually tried to approach me through LinkedIn about my parents' estate. The messages were carefully worded, concerned, urgent but not too urgent. They'd say things like, "I know this is hard, but we really should talk about the house," or "I'm worried about you making decisions without guidance," or "We're family, we should handle this together." Together. That word kept coming up. Together. Like we were a team. Like their interests and my interests were somehow aligned. Like, handling this together didn't actually mean, "Let us tell you what to do." And the guilt. God, the guilt they layered into every interaction. Your parent would want us to stay close. Family should help each other in times like these. Don't you think we deserve to be included? They weaponized my grief. Used my desire to honor my parents' memory as leverage to make me feel obligated to them. The requests started as suggestions, then became expectations, then became demands disguised as concern. "We need to meet to discuss the estate. You really should get a lawyer. Have you thought about liquidating the assets?" Each message a little more insistent, a little more urgent, a little more revealing of what they actually wanted. But here's what they didn't know. Here's what they didn't see, because they were too busy running their pressure campaign to pay attention. I was documenting everything. Every call, every text, every email. I was keeping logs, timestamps, screenshots, saving voicemails, recording conversations where legal in my state. Because my parent had taught me something crucial: when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And create a record of it. So when they later try to rewrite history and claim they were just being helpful, you have evidence of exactly what they said and did. I didn't react emotionally to their pressure. I responded strategically. And I waited for them to escalate, waited for them to show their hand, waited for them to do exactly what I knew they were going to do. Then came the invitation. The one that started all of this. The one that led to that room, those papers, that ambush. It came through the most reasonable-sounding family member. The one who'd always played the role of peacekeeper. The mediator. The rational one. They called me up with this gentle, caring voice and said, "I think we all need to sit down together. Clear the air. Make sure everyone's on the same page. Nothing formal. Just family. Just a conversation." They suggested a neutral location. Not anyone's house. Somewhere public but private. "So everyone feels comfortable," they said. They assured me it would be informal. Casual. No lawyers. No pressure. Just family trying to figure things out together. And I knew it was a trap. I knew from the carefully chosen words. From the emphasis on neutral and comfortable. From the way they kept repeating "no pressure," like that would somehow make the pressure they were planning disappear. But I said yes. Because sometimes the only way to catch someone in a trap is to walk into it. Sometimes you have to let them think they're winning, so you can see exactly how far they're willing to go. And because I had my own plans, my own preparation, my own cards to play when the time was right, the days leading up to that meeting were surreal. Part of me hoped I was wrong. Hoped that maybe they really did just want to talk. That maybe I was being paranoid. That maybe grief had made me suspicious of good intentions. But the other part of me, the part that had been raised by a strategic thinker, the part that had been documenting everything, the part that knew better, that part was ready. That part had already run through a dozen scenarios, had already prepared responses, had already made arrangements they didn't know about. So I showed up, walked through that door, and found exactly what I expected, which is how we ended up back in that room, with those papers, with that stranger, with that ambush. Now let me tell you who was actually in that room. Because it wasn't just family. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a carefully orchestrated intervention designed to separate me from what I was legally entitled to. The stranger, an estate planning attorney they'd hired. Not my attorney. Theirs. There to make their theft look legal. To frame their demands as reasonable compromise. To give their ambush professional credibility. The family members, carefully selected, the ones who'd benefit most from me giving up my inheritance. The ones with the most to gain from me signing away my rights. The ones who'd been coordinating in group chats and phone calls I wasn't included in, planning this exact moment. And those papers, a settlement agreement they drafted without my knowledge or consent. An agreement that would give me a fraction, a tiny fraction, of what my parent had left me. They'd calculated it carefully, made it just enough that it would sound reasonable to an outside observer. Just enough that if I refused, they could paint me as greedy, ungrateful, difficult, the numbers they were offering, a joke, an insult. They wanted me to accept maybe 30% of my actual inheritance. The rest would be redistributed to family members who'd been more involved in your parents' life. That's how they phrased it. Like my relationship with my parent could be measured in visits and phone calls. Like love was a competition, they'd won and I'd lost. And they framed it, they framed it beautifully, as avoiding conflict, as keeping the family together, as honoring your parents' wish for family harmony. They took my parents' actual wishes, which were clearly spelled out in legal documents, and twisted them into whatever narrative justified them stealing from me. The attorney explained it all in this calm, professional voice. Talked about tax implications and probate complications and family dynamics. Made it sound so reasonable, so fair, so necessary, and then added, almost as an afterthought, of course, if we can't resolve this today, things will get much more complicated, much more expensive, much more difficult for everyone. Translation: sign this now, or we'll make your life hell. That's what avoiding conflict actually meant. That's what keeping the family together really was. Extortion wrapped in concern. When I said no, when I refused to sign their settlement and give up my rights, they dropped the pretense entirely. The threats that had been subtle before became explicit. Not blatant enough to be actionable, but clear enough that I understood exactly what they were promising. This will take years to resolve, the attorney said. Legal fees could eat up a significant portion of the estate. You could end up with less than we're offering now. And the family, they paused, let that hang in the air. Well, these disputes tend to cause permanent damage to relationships. One family member jumped in. We're trying to protect you from making this worse than it needs to be. We're trying to help you see reason. But if you're going to be selfish about this, if you're going to put money before family, then we'll have to take other steps. Selfish. That word again. I was selfish for wanting what my parent had left me. I was selfish for not voluntarily handing over 70% of my inheritance to people who'd barely visited. I was selfish for protecting my interests instead of funding theirs. Another family member added, think about your reputation. Think about what people will say when this goes public. When people find out you fought your own family over money. When they hear your side of the story versus ours. That was a threat. A clear, direct threat to destroy my reputation. To control the narrative. To make sure that if this became public, I would be painted as the villain. The greedy child who tore the family apart over money. They talked about financial harm. About how expensive litigation would be. About how I'd have to hire attorneys and pay court costs and spend years fighting this. About how it would drain the estate. About how I'd end up with nothing. And then they weaponized the one word designed to make me doubt myself. Fair. They kept using that word. Over and over. This is fair. We're being fair. Why won't you accept a fair compromise? They redefined fair to mean whatever benefited them. Made it sound like rejecting their theft was rejecting fairness itself. I sat there, listening to all of this, feeling my hands shake with rage. Feeling that white-hot fury at being told I was selfish for not letting them rob me. At being threatened for protecting what was legally and morally mine. At being ambushed by people who claimed to love me. And then I played my card. The one I'd been holding. The one they didn't know existed. The one that was about to turn their entire ambush inside out. Remember that strange line I said earlier? The one about choosing this specific location. Let me tell you why that mattered. I looked at the attorney, made direct eye contact, and repeated it, but with full context this time. I said, it's interesting that you chose to meet here, in a state with two-party consent laws for recording conversations, and in a semi-public location where witness testimony about what's said here would be admissible in court. I let that sink in for a moment. Watch their faces change. Watch the color drain. Watch the realization hit. I should also mention, I continued, that I brought my own attorney. They're not here in this room, obviously. That would have been too obvious. But they're nearby. They've been nearby this whole time, waiting for my signal. I pulled out my phone, sent a text. 2 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked my attorney. Not a hired gun, not some general practitioner. A specialist in estate law and elder financial abuse. Someone who'd been listening to everything. Taking notes. Documenting every threat. Every manipulation. every attempt to pressure me into signing away my rights. My attorney smiled. Polite, professional, devastating. Thank you all for being so clear about your intentions today. It'll make the filing process much simpler. The room exploded. Everyone started talking at once, demanding explanations, claiming they'd been misunderstood, insisting they were just trying to help. Their attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. He knew how bad this looked, how their entire strategy had just been documented by a specialist who knew exactly what to look for. My attorney raised a hand. Silence fell. My client will not be signing any agreements today, or any day. The estate will be settled according to the actual legal documents, the will, the trust, the clear intentions of the deceased, not according to whatever settlement you've drafted. Any further attempts to pressure, threaten, or manipulate my client will be documented and presented as evidence of undue influence and potential elder financial abuse of the deceased prior to their death. That last part, that was the kill shot, because my attorney wasn't just protecting my inheritance. They were implying that maybe, just maybe, these people had been manipulating my parent before they died, had been positioning themselves, had been laying groundwork, and now we had evidence of a pattern of manipulative behavior. I stood up, looked at each person in that room, at their shocked faces, their angry faces, their trapped faces, and I said, "This meeting is over. Any further communication goes through my attorney. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my house. We're done here." And I walked out, with my attorney, while they sat there in that room, realizing they just lost control of the narrative they thought they owned. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? That they back off, accept defeat, move on. But people who feel entitled to your money don't give up just because you said no. They don't stop just because you caught them. They double down. They retaliate. They escalate. The first few days after the meeting were silent. Radio silence. No calls. No texts. No attempts to reach out. And that silence was louder than any threat because I knew what it meant. It meant they were regrouping, strategizing, planning their next move. Then the retaliation started. Subtle at first. Indirect. The kind of things that are hard to prove but easy to feel. Social media posts about family betrayal. Vague booking about people who choose money over relationships. Messages sent to mutual friends and extended family, positioning themselves as the victims. As the reasonable ones who just wanted to resolve things peacefully. They were controlling the narrative. Or trying to. Painting me as the greedy one. The difficult one. The one who'd brought lawyers into a family matter. Conveniently leaving out the part where they'd brought an attorney to ambush me. Then it got more direct. I started noticing strange activity. Someone tried to access my parents' online accounts. Multiple failed login attempts on their bank accounts. Their email. Their social media. Someone was looking for something. Searching for leverage. For evidence they could use against me. For anything that would support their version of events. They tried to interfere with the estate process. Filed objections. Requested audits. Demanded documentation. Anything to slow things down. To make it expensive. To make it difficult. To prove their earlier threats weren't empty. But here's the thing about patterns. Once you start looking for them, they're everywhere. And I've been documenting everything from the beginning. Every call. Every text. Every strange login attempt. Every social media post. Every attempt to turn family members against me. Every single move they made I documented. Timestamped. Saved. Backed up. Because my parent taught me something crucial. People who are willing to betray you once will do it again. And the more they escalate, the more evidence they create. So don't react emotionally. React strategically. And let them bury themselves. Let me tell you about documentation. About the power of creating a comprehensive, irrefutable record of exactly what happened and when. I kept everything. And I mean everything. Emails. Saved. Screenshots. Backed up in 3 locations. Text messages. Downloaded and archived. Voicemails. Recorded and transcribed. Every single interaction was logged. Date. Time. Content. Context. But I didn't stop there. Because personal documentation isn't enough when you're dealing with people who'll lie. Who'll claim things didn't happen the way you remember. Who'll say you're exaggerating, or being emotional, or misinterpreting their intentions? So I got third-party confirmation. Witnesses. The friends and extended family members they tried to turn against me. I reached out to them directly. Explain my side. Show them the evidence. Let them see the threats, the manipulation, the documented pattern of behavior. And you know what happened? Most of them believed me. Because I had proof. Because I wasn't asking them to take my word for it. I was showing them exactly what had been said and done. I brought in neutral professionals. A forensic accountant to review the estate finances. A digital security expert to document the unauthorized access attempts. A private investigator to verify the timeline of events. These weren't people with emotional stakes in the outcome. They were experts who could testify, if necessary, to exactly what had happened. My attorney helped me organize everything into a comprehensive case file. Chronological, cross-referenced, indexed, the kind of documentation that makes judges' jobs easy. That makes opposing attorneys nervous. That makes people realize they can't just lie their way out of this. Every threatening phone call. Documented. Every attempt to manipulate. Documented. Every social media post designed to damage my reputation. Documented. Every unauthorized access attempt. Documented. Every lie they told about the situation. Documented with evidence of the truth. And here's what I learned. Documentation is power. When you can prove exactly what happened, people can't gaslight you. They can't rewrite history. They can't make you doubt your own reality. They have to face the consequences of their actions, because those actions are now part of the permanent record. Quiet preparation beats emotional reaction every single time. While they were busy retaliating, I was busy building a case they couldn't refute. Eventually, the formal process began. Not because I wanted revenge. Not because I wanted to punish them. But because some actions require official consequences. Because letting people get away with financial manipulation only emboldens them to do it again. To someone else. To someone who might not have the resources or knowledge to fight back. My attorney filed the appropriate motions. Presented the documentation. Made the case. Not emotionally. Not dramatically. Just factually. Here's what happened. Here's the evidence. Here's what the law says about situations like this. Their attorney tried to spin it. Tried to make excuses. Tried to claim misunderstandings and miscommunications. But it's hard to claim misunderstanding when there are literal text messages saying, "Sign this, or we'll make your life hell." It's hard to claim good intentions when there's documented evidence of threats and manipulation. The judge wasn't interested in their explanations. Wasn't moved by their claims of family harmony and good intentions. Because judges deal with this stuff all the time. They know what elder financial abuse looks like. They know what undue influence looks like. They know what happens when grieving people get ambushed by family members with dollar signs in their eyes. The estate was settled according to the actual legal documents. The ones my parent had carefully prepared. The ones that reflected their actual wishes, not the revised version my family had tried to force on me. I got what was legally mine. Not more. Not less. Exactly what my parent had intended. But more than that, there were consequences for their behavior. Not massive consequences. Not life-destroying consequences. But structural ones. Official ones. The kind that go on records. That affect future proceedings. That make it harder to pull the same scheme on someone else. Their attempts to interfere with the estate process. Noted by the court. Their unauthorized access attempts. Reported. Their threats. Documented in official filings. Their lies. Corrected by evidence. Everything they'd done, thinking they could get away with it, became part of the permanent record. Justice isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the quiet satisfaction of watching facts override manipulation. Of watching evidence speak louder than lies. Of watching the system work exactly the way it's supposed to when you do the work of building an airtight case. You know what happened after all of this was resolved? Nothing dramatic. No big celebration. No victory lap. No public declaration of vindication. I just moved on. Started rebuilding my life without those people in it. And you know what? It was quieter. Calmer. Better. People think that cutting off toxic family members leaves this gaping hole in your life. That you'll feel incomplete or guilty or sad. And maybe for some people that's true. But for me, It felt like taking off a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. Like finally being able to breathe without worrying about who was going to betray me next. I didn't need revenge. Didn't need them to apologize or acknowledge what they'd done. Didn't need public vindication. I just needed them gone. Out of my life. Out of my space. Out of my head. The inheritance my parent left me, I used it exactly the way they would have wanted. Not frivolously. Not to prove anything. Just to build a stable, secure life. To honor their memory by living the way they taught me to live. Carefully. Thoughtfully. Protected. Life became smaller in some ways. Fewer family gatherings. Fewer obligations. Fewer people to manage and appease and worry about. But it also became fuller. Because I could invest in relationships that were actually healthy. Actually reciprocal. Actually based on love instead of leverage. I sleep better now. Don't have that constant low-level anxiety wondering when the next manipulation is coming. Don't have to decode messages looking for hidden meanings. Don't have to document every interaction in case it becomes evidence later. Sometimes people ask if I regret it, if I wish I just signed their agreement and kept the peace. And I look at them like they're crazy. Because what peace? There was never peace. There was just me accepting mistreatment and calling it family. Real peace isn't avoiding conflict. Real peace is having boundaries that protect you. And enforcing those boundaries even when people claim it makes you the bad guy. If you're watching this and any of it feels familiar, if you've ever been pressured by family, manipulated by people who claim to love you, threatened for protecting your own interests, I need you to hear this. Family is not a free pass to abuse you. Blood relation is not permission to manipulate. Love is not supposed to come with conditions that benefit them at your expense. Real family, real love, doesn't ambush you with lawyers. Doesn't threaten you for saying no. Doesn't try to guilt you into giving up what's legally and morally yours. Real family respects your boundaries, supports your decisions, wants what's best for you, not what's most convenient for them. And if the people in your life don't do that, if they pressure you, manipulate you, threaten you, they're not family, not in any way that matters. They're just people who happen to share your DNA and think that gives them rights to your life, your money, your grief. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. Setting boundaries is not selfish. Saying no to people who want to use you is not wrong. It's necessary. It's survival. It's self-respect. You don't owe toxic people access to your life just because you're related. You don't owe manipulative people the benefit of the doubt just because they raised you or shared holidays with you or were there for you in the past. Past goodness doesn't purchase future immunity from consequences. If you're being pressured right now, if someone's using the "but we're family" card to justify treating you badly, document everything. Save every text. Record every call where it's legal. Keep every email. Build your case not because you want to use it, but because you might need to. Because people who manipulate will also lie. And when they lie, you'll need proof of the truth. Get professional help. Not because you're weak. Not because you can't handle it alone. But because professionals know the game. They've seen it before. They know the patterns and the tactics and the legal frameworks that protect you. And they can't be guilted or manipulated the way you can be. Choose peace over performance. Choose safety over sentiment. Choose your own well-being over other people's comfort. Because at the end of the day, you're the one who has to live with the consequences of your choices. Not them. You. And you deserve a life that's peaceful. Safe. Yours. Not controlled by people who think love is a weapon and guilt is a tool. Let me bring this back to where we started. That room. Those papers. That ambush. That moment when I realized the people I trusted were willing to destroy me for money. They made one critical miscalculation. They assumed that grief would make me weak. That loss would make me compliant. That being outnumbered would make me easy to manipulate. They saw a vulnerable target and thought they'd found an easy mark. But they forgot something. Or maybe they never knew it in the first place. They forgot that I'd been taught by the parent they were trying to steal from. The parent who valued preparation over appearances. Who believed in protecting yourself before trusting others. Who understood that the best defense against manipulation is documentation and professional support. They walked into that meeting thinking they held all the cards. The numbers. The coordination. The professional help. The element of surprise. They thought they'd overwhelm me into submission, pressure me into signing, threaten me into compliance. They didn't realize I'd been preparing too, that I'd anticipated exactly the scenario, that I'd documented their pressure campaign, that I'd hired my own professional help, that I'd chosen that location specifically because of its legal implications, that I'd been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Because here's the truth they learned too late. The real power was never the money. It was never the legal documents or the inheritance or the assets. The real power was preparation, knowledge, strategic thinking, the willingness to protect yourself even when it means disappointing people who claim to love you. They thought they could take what wasn't theirs. They thought family meant automatic trust. They thought pressure would work where persuasion had failed. They were wrong on all counts. And now I'm free. They're gone from my life. The inheritance is settled. The documentation is filed. The consequences are official. And I'm living the life my parent wanted for me. Safe, secure, protected, and free from people who see me as an opportunity instead of a person. So if you're in that room right now, if you're staring at papers you don't understand, surrounded by people who are pressuring you, feeling outnumbered and overwhelmed, remember this. You have more power than they want you to know. You have options they haven't told you about. You have rights they're hoping you won't exercise. Don't sign anything in that moment. Don't let them rush you. Don't let guilt or pressure or threats make you give up what's yours. Walk out if you need to. Get professional help. Document everything. And protect yourself with the same energy they're using to try to rob you. Because you deserve better than people who only show up when there's something to take. You deserve peace, safety, a life that's actually yours. And sometimes getting that life means being willing to lose people who were never really there for you in the first place. If this story resonated with you, if it helped you see your own situation more clearly, if it gave you the courage to set boundaries or protect yourself, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories like this, more truths that need to be told, more people who need to hear that protecting yourself isn't betrayal. Drop a comment if you've been through something similar. Share this with anyone who needs to hear it. And remember, the real power isn't money. It's knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise. Thanks for watching. Stay strong, stay protected, and remember, family is who shows up for you, not who shows up for your money.